Hello my friends and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 full party building guide for Honor Mode. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're covering my pick for the best Patch 8 party in Baldur's Gate 3, using only the new subclasses. We're going to be building 4 individually extremely strong characters that, when put together, create a whole that is even more than the sum of its parts, yielding a synergistic and devastatingly powerful Honor Mode team. We'll be using only the new Patch 8 subclasses for these characters, so you can maximize experiencing the new content. And just like all of my other Honor Mode party build guides, this one will have no overlapping items, because these characters are designed to work together and require no specific story choices, so you can use this no matter what your plan is for your Honor Mode run. In this particular guide, we will also be getting access to pretty much every one of the most powerful items and mechanics in Baldur's Gate 3 alongside the incredibly strong characters. So if you've been waiting to try to get your Honor Mode win, this is going to be a very easy and very smooth way to do it. Before I begin, I do want to take a quick moment to say thank you so much to Fading Sunset for the $5 donation, Joseph Fiore for the $20, Tarantula for the $5, and Stephen V and Phil Zaster for becoming channel members. Thank you so much, my friends. I really appreciate the support. It really means a lot. Alright, let's build a party. We're going to start with our main damage dealer and one of the most powerful characters in the game overall, the Hexblade Warlock. This is going to be the centerpiece of our party, with the awesome sustained damage that it brings, both in melee and at ranged, allowing you to win longer fights, and the incredible burst damage letting you end fights before they begin. We also get awesome control spells, great defensive utilities, and great personal defenses, so this character adds a layer of safety to the party, in addition to the incredible amount of damage that it deals that makes everything else just so much smoother. So this is going to be the core that we're building our strategy around. For this character, we are of course going to be taking Eldritch Blast and Booming Blade as our 2 cantrips, so that we do ranged damage and melee damage at the highest possible level. And we're going to be picking up Hexblade Warlock, which allows us to build everything off of our charisma. For our spell selection at first level, we're taking Shield, which gives us amazing defensive utility, and Hex, which again adds to our sustained damage. So right from the beginning of the game, this character does its job incredibly well. One of the great things about this party overall is all of the builds come online extremely early, so you never have a weak point for your party, and the Hexblade Warlock is very archetypal of that because of how early it gets its major power spikes. For our ability score selection, we're going to be taking 16 in Charisma, 12 in Wisdom, 8 in Intelligence, 14 Constitution, and 16 in Dexterity. This character is going to be in medium armor, and then later on, possibly in a robe, depending on your story events, so you want high Dexterity both for the initiative and also for the armor class. This character will not be using Ethel's Hair. If you get that, that is better on a different character, so you don't need to take odd starting points in Charisma, though it is a great candidate for the Mirror of Loss in Act 3, so if you do end up getting the full +3 benefit from the Mirror, you can respec to take 17 Charisma at that point, and then you'll just drop your Wisdom down to 10 if you plan to do the full +3 bonus from that for this character. One of the really cool things about this party, also, is that we end up with 4 charisma characters. So any one of them can be your party face, depending on what races they're playing, what backgrounds they have. Basically, just whichever one has the highest persuasion check is going to make you the best party face. So you can pick your skills based on which one you want to handle the dialogue, whether that's your main character or you have a particular reason to want one of these characters to be the party face. There is one that gets a bonus to skills. The bard will be slightly better at it, but for the most part, you can have any of these characters handle dialogue, and you will be in great shape in terms of dialogue. So any one of these characters can be your main character if you prefer to do conversations with your main character. Also, for this character, what companion or race you pick doesn't matter from a mechanical standpoint. The party will have significant darkness synergy, so any of the characters can benefit from having extra casts of darkness by playing a drow, half-drow, or Asmodeus Tiefling, and of course the normally incredibly strong picks like Githyanki for the Misty Step and the additional skill access, Halfling for the ability to reroll ones, or Wood Elf or Half Wood Elf for the bonus movement speed, or of course Dwergar for the broken out-of-combat invisibility are all excellent options, but you're very open as to what race you pick for this character. At character level 2, we are going to take another spell here. What spell we pick doesn't really matter. We're going to swap it at level 3 anyways, but you can grab Armor of Agathis for a little early game safety. And then we're taking, of course, Agonizing Blast and Devil's Sight. This party gets tremendous darkness synergy, which is one of the most powerful mechanics in Baldur's Gate 3. So, of course, we want our Warlock to be able to naturally see through darkness, and Agonizing Blast gives us great ranged damage. Character level 3, we're going to get second level spells, and of course we are going to take Shadowblade. As a Hexblade Warlock, we can have this as our hexed weapon, we can use the Resonant Stone for broken amounts of damage output, and so this character is now going to be dealing incredible melee damage, as well as awesome ranged damage with our Agonizing Blasts. For our Pact boon, we're going to be taking the Pact of the Blade so that we get extra attack with our Hexed Weapon at level 5, and we're going to replace whatever spell we took at level 2 with another second level spell. In this case, I'm going to recommend, of course, taking Darkness. Now, this is not going to be the primary Darkness caster for the party, because our Shadow Sorcerer is usually going to be the one casting Darkness, because they can't see through it unless they use their special ability to cast it. But having extra casts of Darkness with a Darkness synergy, a Darkness-focused party, is always going to be great, so this character should have access to it as well. At level 4, we're going to be taking our first feat, and the feat that we're going to be taking, as with many Honor Mode characters, is of course Alert. Alert is incredible for Honor Mode. It means that we don't have to invest any initiative gear on this character, because we're going to want it for a different character. Going before enemies means that they often don't get turns, so of course, most Honor Mode runs are going to want this on as many characters as possible. For our cantrip selection here, we're going to take Bone Chill. This gives us a great offensive option for shutting down enemy healing, giving undead disadvantage, which when we're coming up to Act 2 is very useful. And for our spell selection, we're going to go ahead and take Misty Step. This gives us a great panic button to get out of trouble if we happen to find ourselves in danger. At level 5, we get third level spells, and of course, the third level spells that we're going to take are going to be Counterspell, yet another great defensive option that this character brings to the party. Having 2 copies of Counterspell, which we will in this party, makes you extremely safe against even some of the most dangerous enemy effects in the game. Now, if an enemy casts a 6th level spell, you're going to need to use a 6th level counter spell from your Sorcerer, but up to level 5, you will always, level 5 spells, you'll always succeed at counterspelling them with a Warlock, because they get the automatic spell slot upgrades. For our Eldritch Invocation, of course, we're going to be taking Repelling Blast, so we can push enemies back into hazardous effects that we set up. And speaking of hazardous effects, we no longer need to concentrate on Hex on this character, because we have a much better concentration option in the form of Hunger of Hadar. Yet another game-winning spell that this character brings to the party, and of course, if you can keep enemies trapped in it, which this party is very good at doing, then they won't be able to do anything and will be taking constant damage. Character level 6. We don't have a lot of decisions to make, but we do get our Spectres, which are really nice for just clogging up the battlefield. We're going to go back and grab a control spell. Later on, of course, this character can use the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel incredibly efficiently, so we're going to take illusion and enchantment control spells in order to have the most powerful versions of those effects available. Level 7, we're going to take a level 4 spells. Now, this character doesn't have a ton of level 4 spells specifically that we really want. Phantasmal Killer's kind of fun on a Hexblade Warlock, but you're more likely to just go back and make sure you have all the best Band of the Mystic Scoundrel options, like Hypnotic Pattern for a big AoE control spell. And then we're going to take Dreadful Word because, again, this is an enchantment control spell in the form of Confusion, so it gives us yet another amazing control option with this character. This character brings both extremely powerful lockdown and extremely powerful control. Level 8, we're taking our feat, and of course that's going to be an increase to our charisma, and our spell selection is going to be, again, rounding out our spells. We'll take Phantasmal Killer here. With the Resonant Stone, enemies will have vulnerability to this, and with the free upgrade to Warlock spell slots, Phantasmal Killer is actually a really nice one for Hexblades. Warlock level 9, we get 5th level spells, and this is where things get a little more exciting in terms of our spell selection. Cone of Cold will let us blow up groups of enemies, which is pretty nice. This character has, up to this point, done everything except for AoE damage, so having that available is awesome as well. Our Eldritch Invocation here mostly doesn't matter. We're going to have Conjure Elemental from a different character instead, so you don't really need to take Minions of Chaos. So you can go back and pick up whatever you think might be fun for this character. Maybe you just want to do utility spells like Mask of Many Faces or something like that. Hexblade level 10. We get our cantrip selection here, and this character can benefit from emergency blade wards sometime, especially in the late game when your armor class is low, so I recommend picking that up. And then for our spell selection, you can grab Banishing Smite for even more burst damage. In melee, this adds 5d10 force damage, which of course is awesome for this character. Level 11, you get your 3rd Warlock spell slot, as well as your 6th level spell, so we can pick up Create Undead here, which gives us yet another awesome day-long summon that we can use in order to power up the party significantly. This party ends up with a pretty major summoning sub-theme, because we get some of the most powerful summons in the game, and you can have several of them running around. And then for our spell selection, we're going to go ahead and grab Hold Monster. Again, we want these enchantment-based control spells in order to use the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel most effectively. Finally, at character level 12, you can pick up whatever spell here. Banishment is really nice in some late game boss fights, so you can grab that, but at this point, you mostly have the spells that you need the most, so you can pick up whatever you think is going to be the most fun to play with. And of course, for our Invocation, we get Life Drinker, allowing us to do even more melee damage based on our Charisma. Speaking of Charisma, for our feat, we're going to take an ability improvement to boost our Charisma to maximum. If you're using the Mirror, you can also take Savage Attacker at this point. This character rolls a lot of dice, so Savage Attacker is a lot of extra damage. However, the maxing out your Charisma is more important than getting Savage Attacker. You already do so much damage, you don't really need more average damage. Savage Attacker is kind of overkill, but it is great to have if you have that option. 4 items for this character. We're going to start with the broken stuff, because one of the great things about this party is that it gets access to all the broken mechanics in Baldur's Gate 3. So firstly, of course, we've got our Shadowblade. This is going to be our main weapon throughout the entire game. Remember to cast this at the beginning of every adventuring day. You're always going to want to spend 1 spell slot on that, and then remember to bind it as your Hex weapon so that it uses your Charisma for attack and damage. In addition to the Shadowblade, you can either use a shield in the early game for more defenses, or a more offensive weapon with a passive, like the Knife of the Undermountain King. Knife of the Undermountain King, because these are both short swords, you can dual wield them, of course, and this will increase your critical chance, which is very important. This is very nice for this character because you roll so many dice, and that can increase your damage output. Now remember, if you're dual wielding with this character, to turn off the dual wielding button here to make sure that the game doesn't use your offhand attack unless you want it to. Since this won't be bound as a hexed weapon, it's going to use your dexterity to roll its attacks, so it will typically have lower hit chance and do lower damage, obviously, than your Shadowblade. You also have really important uses for your bonus actions. In the late game, for an offensive choice, you can swap this to Rhapsody. Obviously, this is the best passive weapon in the game, and because it is a dagger, you can wield it again alongside the Shadowblade for additional damage, spell save DC, and bonus to attack rolls. These work as well on your ranged attacks, so this increases the damage and attack rolls of your Eldritch Blasts, makes you way better at casting control spells even before you've built up arcane acuity stacks, and everything in addition to that. Of course, we're using the Shadowblade, which does psychic damage, so to combine this, we're going to use the Resonant Stone, which gives everything nearby the Steeped in Bliss condition, doubling the damage that they take from our character's attacks. So we're going to be doing an average of hundreds of damage on every single attack when we are using the Resonant Stone and the Shadowblade, especially because we can add even more damage if we want to with a Banishing Smite, for example. We can get guaranteed critical hits using the Luck of the Far Realms Illithid power if you go that route on this character in order to multiply your damage tremendously. Now, of course, because this is an aura steeped in bliss, you could have a different character carry the Resonant Stone, and there are some advantages to doing that. One of the downsides of this character is relatively low saving throws, and the steeped in bliss condition does reduce your, gives you disadvantage on mental saving throws, which can be dangerous, though we're going to offset that with our second character, but it does mean that you have to be much more careful with your positioning of this character and your ally. allies. So generally, I like to just have this character carry the Resonant Stone because it's going to make it easy to apply the psychic damage. So that's your weapon setup early game, Shadowblade and the Adamantine Shield, or any shield, and the Knife of the Undermountain King. Late game, Shadowblade and Rhapsody. For our ranged weapon, you can use the Deadshot. No other character in the party needs it, and that increases your critical damage even further. The broken stuff doesn't stop there, though, because we also get to use the Gloves of Battle Mage's Power. Since Shadowblade is a spell, every single attack counts as a spell that uses a weapon. So whenever we attack an enemy, we're going to get stacks of arcane acuity, which will increase the hit chance with our spells and the DC of our control spells, because of course this character can output incredible crowd control with all the control spells that we've taken. Combine this with the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel, and you can use these as a bonus action with enchantment or illusion spells like Confusion, Hypnotic Pattern, or the various hold persons and hold monsters, which then get you guaranteed critical hits with subsequent attacks. So the amount of damage and control the character can output is absurd. For our second ring, we're going to go with the Ring of Arcane Synergy. Whenever you deal damage with a cantrip, you gain Arcane Synergy, adding your Charisma modifier to your weapon damage again. And remember, we're already doing that twice because we have Life Drinker and we're a Hexblade. So this is a third use of our Charisma for our weapon damage. And we're doing damage with a cantrip every turn because we're casting Booming Blade on every attack. So this character just adds massive amounts of damage with this combination of items. For our armor, in the early game, you're just going to want to use a solid defensive medium armor like the Adamantine Scale Mail, and then in the late game, you're going to swap to the Potent Robe. You can use this alongside the Eldritch Invocation that gives you mage armor as well if you are going the Potent Robe, which will allow your cantrips, including Booming Blade, to deal your Charisma modifier to damage yet another time, as well as giving you the additional temp HP and everything as well. So, Potent Robe, incredibly powerful for every Hexblade. If you aren't taking the story event or taking the story path that gets you the Potent Robe, because only some playthroughs get this item, then just a great end game medium armor is the Flame Enameled armor, giving you even more initiative and better saving throws, as well as resistance to cold and fire damage for relevant late game defenses. So no other characters need these items, and they will power up this character enormously. This is going to be the centerpiece of your party that does all of your damage output and a big chunk of your crowd control, making sure that enemies die or are locked down before the fight ever starts. Now, as insanely powerful as our first character is, it does come with one major downside, which is that the Resonant Stone makes saving throws pretty dangerous for the party. So with our second character, we're going to completely remove that downside, as well as providing an incredible character in its own right. This will be our secondary damage dealer, able to deal amazing burst damage when you want to bring down one high health enemy, as well as our main tank, being almost impossible for enemies to kill, passively debuffing enemies that are near them, providing great crowd control and solid, consistent damage, as well as excellent burst damage, and also a ton of utility, healing, and bonuses for your party using the Oath of the Crown Paladin. Oath of the Crown Paladins can also act as a secondary healer through their subclass ability and Lay on Hands, and give us Righteous Clarity, which smooths out our early game, making our attacks more likely to land, and is still extremely powerful in the late game, especially since we're using a Shadow Blade with our Hexblade. So the additional attack roll on that, which doesn't come with an enhancement bonus, unlike normal weapons, so we'll typically have a lower chance to hit, allows your Hexblade to hit every attack almost guaranteed. For this character, of course, we're starting with Oath of the Crown Paladin, and for our ability score selection, we're going to take something that looks a little bit unusual here, because at level 2, we're going to take Hexblade in order to allow our Charisma to be our attack stat. The reason for this, of course, is we want to max our Charisma so that our ability to provide saving throws to our allies is as high as possible, as well as giving us the maximum value on the save DC of our spells, which will be relevant as a Crown Paladin as well. So we're going to take a very familiar-looking attribute split with 16 Charisma, 16 in Dexterity, 14 in Constitution, and 12 in Wisdom. If you are using Ethel's Hair in this playthrough, then this is the character that's going to get it. So if you plan to have Ethel's Hair, then you're going to want to take 10 Wisdom and 17 Charisma so that you can hit 18 by just applying Ethel's Hair to this character. For your skill selection here, again, this, just like all of our charisma-based characters, could be our party face, so you can happily take persuasion or intimidation here, or other paladin class skills from background. You may also want to grab athletics just to make yourself slightly harder to push in the late game. Since you have low strength by default, this character can sometimes be shoved around by enemies. So the higher athletics check can prevent that, especially if you're not using the skills on your party face. But mostly, it's basically take dialogue skills if you plan to use those, grab athletics if you don't. At character level 2, we're going to immediately take a level of Hexblade Warlock so that we can attack using our charisma. Don't worry, not every build is going to be a Hexblade build in this party, but for this character, it's such a massive boost to your power level because it lets you tie everything to a single attribute, so your Paladin aura will be even more effective. For our cantrip selection, as a Hexblade, we're going to take Eldritch Blast and Booming Blade, which again increases our damage output enormously and gives us a solid ranged option. You can also take Blade Ward to give yourself a great defensive tool on this character as well, or if it's your party face, you can pick up Friends if you want to use that. The Eldritch Blast is useful for if you don't have any other good ranged options, but not totally necessary for this character. Still a very powerful cantrip to have access to. For our spell selection as a Hexblade, we're going to go ahead and take Shield and Hex as well. Again, just increasing our damage output and making ourselves even tankier. Combined with heavy armor and shield proficiency, the shield spell is going to make this character incredibly difficult to kill, or to hit with attacks, and we get one spell slot per short rest with our one level of Warlock that we can spend on the shield spell in order to give ourselves a nice defensive bonus in case we need it. Level 3, we're going right back into Paladin in order to get Paladin Smites and some more level 1 spell slots. For your fighting style here, we're going to take Defense Fighting Style. This character can benefit from having a very high armor class. We want to get up in enemies' faces, especially because late game we are going to be using Spirit Guardians to run at enemies, since Crown Paladins get access to that, so we don't want to lose concentration on Spirit Guardians. Having the Defense Fighting Style helps us do that. Your most useful spells on this character are going to be, of course, Command. Since we're going to be maxing Charisma, we will be able to use Command just as well as a full spellcaster. So this gives us a tool for locking down enemies very easily, in addition to the damage, tanking, and utility that this character provides. We get Bless, which is a great concentration spell for the early game. If you want to buff up your whole party, then Bless is very valuable, and we don't otherwise get access to Bless in this party, so this character can be our Bless caster, other than with the buff on heal items, which we will talk about in a second here. Thunderous Smite can be used in the same turn as a Paladin Smite, although be aware that it does eat your bonus action as well, but it doesn't require your concentration, can be used in the same turn as a Paladin Smite to spend 2 level 1 spell slots to increase your burst damage even further. And then you can take more utility spells, things like Protection from Evil and Good. Shield of Faith you can concentrate on all day for even higher armor class if you want as well. That's not always the best use of a spell slot, but useful especially in the early game. So there's a lot of utility spells, but mostly this gives you access to 2 more super powerful spells in the form of Command and Bless. Paladin level 3, of course, with Oath of the Crown, we now get Command by default, so you can prepare something else, and we get the Turn the Tide and Champion Challenge actions, letting us control enemies even further. So go ahead and just grab any other situationally powerful spell here. And then at level 4, we're going to take a feat, and the feat we're going to take is an ability improvement to maximize our charisma. This character is going to use our initiative gear, so you will still have high initiative on this character, enough to win against almost every enemy in the game without taking alert. Since we took the Warlock level, we can't afford to take alert. If you have Ethel's Hair, then you can pick up a feat like Alert, but if you're taking Ethel's Hair on this character in order to get 18 Charisma naturally and 20 with only a single ASI, the second feat that you should take is actually Sentinel. This character can lock enemies in place very easily, and then they're trapped inside the Spirit Guardians, receiving radiating orbs, taking a bunch of damage. You can trap them inside darkness effects from your Shadow Sorcerer as well, or Hunger of Hadar, and so on with the Sentinel attacks, so this will give you even more lockdown with Ethel's Hair. Savage Attacker for even more damage is also a possibility, though again, this party does so much damage that you mostly don't actually need to boost your damage any further. Level 5, we get Warding Bond, which if you're not using a camp caster, which this party does not need to, Warding Bond and Aid are both useful spells that this character can spend spell slots on. Remember, you can refresh your spell slots using elixirs or items that refresh spell slots in order to have Aid up on your party if you want to, though another party member will provide a ton of temporary hit points as well, and Warding Bond can help you keep one of your squishier allies alive by redirecting some damage to this character. Of course, we also get extra attack for even more damage. No decisions to make at Paladin level 6, but now we get Aura of Protection, giving us, and they've finally fixed this tooltip, by the way, which I love, though I wish it said +4 equal to your charisma bonus. Used to be this tooltip always showed +0, but it has now been finally fixed after 2 years. So we get a +4 bonus to the saving throws of all of our party members as long as they stay around this paladin. This party wants to fight from darkness clouds anyways, so you're going to be playing fairly close together. That means you'll be benefiting from the Aura of Protection full time, and your party will be significantly safer as a result. So you get to build a fortress out of darkness alongside the Spirit Guardians and damage effects that this character provides. We also get Divine Allegiance. Now, Divine Allegiance is a little bit risky to use, but it can help heal an ally who might be taking lethal damage. So since you're going to be playing close together anyways, this does give you a reaction that could potentially save an ally. Since this character is going to be using the Radiating Orb gear, it will debuff the Paladin, so just be aware of that, but it is nevertheless a useful ability to have. At level 8, we get another feat, and we're just going to take another boost to our charisma to max out our weapon damage, spell save DCs, and the buff from our aura. Again, if you have Ethel's Hair, put it on this character and take Sentinel as your second feat in order to lock down enemies. Level 9 on Paladin, we get Spirit Guardians, which allows you to have an amazing concentration spell, and this character can now do tons of radiant damage with the Spirit Guardians combined with their smite attacks in order to lock down enemies with Radiating Orb extremely effectively. Works incredibly if you do have Sentinel, but also just gives this character a great debuffing tool in addition to all of the tanking and damage dealing that it was already capable of. Then at Paladin level 10, you also get Aura of Courage. This is an awesome ability. This party doesn't naturally get access to Hero's Feast. It's one of the few tools that we are missing. You can either, of course, use a camp caster to just cast Hero's Feast on your party, but if you don't like using camp casters, Aura of Courage will give you the most important aspect of Hero's Feast, making your whole party immune to Frightened, which is very useful in the late game. There are some extremely powerful enemies with fear effects. Being immune to them just makes your party significantly stronger, and it removes yet another way that you could potentially lose the game. So between the saving throw boost and the fear immunity, you really don't have to worry about the disadvantage on mental saves from the Resonant Stone. This character offsets those completely. Finally, at character level 11, you get the improved Divine Smite, making you even more of a threat in melee, and also, combined with the Radiating Orb gear, giving you debuffs with Radiating Orb effects on every single attack, as well as from Spirit Guardians, not only when you smite, but also just on normal attacks as well. For items for this character, our items actually come in 2 different stages, depending on whether we have leveled up enough to get Spirit Guardians or not on this character. So in the early acts, we're going to be using the Buff on Heal item set, the Hellrider's Pride and the Whispering Promise, which can apply Bless and Blade Ward to our allies whenever we heal them. This character actually does a significant amount of healing. Between the ability to prepare Cure Wounds if you really need it in an emergency, Paladin's natural Lay on Hands, and the AoE healing from Turn the Tide that Crown Paladin gets, as well as the ability to just throw or drink healing potions, this character does a surprising amount of healing and is quite good at applying these buffs. So in the early game, we're actually going to be a better healer for carrying these items than our more dedicated late game healer, and then we'll swap roles with that character once we get Spirit Guardians and pick up the Radiating Orb gear instead. The Radiating Orb gear, being the Coruscation Ring, the Callous Glow Ring, and the Luminous Armor, will allow us to apply Radiating Orbs to enemies with our Spirit Guardians, and the Callous Glow Ring does radiant damage with every damage source that we do, and the Shockwaves and Radiating Orbs from these items will debuff enemies significantly. This is a darkness-focused party, so enemies will usually be making their attacks with disadvantage. Combine that with the attack penalty that they'll be taking from Radiating Orbs, and enemies will just never hit our allies. So the debuffs that we apply passively by running next to them with Spirit Guardians, and also hitting them with our radiant damage that we naturally have, and our smite attacks, which add more radiant damage, will cause enemies to never hit their attacks. We can stack that in addition with the Gloves of Belligerent Skies and the Boots of Stormy Clamor to add reverberation to this Radiating Orb effect to do even more damage and knock enemies prone, disrupting their concentration, causing them to waste turns. So enemies will be significantly debuffed just by being near this character. And what's even better, because we're a Paladin, we have super high armor class, we have the shield spell from our level of Hexblade Warlock, we have shield proficiency and everything, and we have incredible saving throws because we're getting a +5 to all of our saving throws from our charisma. We will never lose concentration on Spirit Guardians, so we will always be able to apply these debuffs. So early game, buff on heal items, late game, Radiating Orb item. In addition to these broken item effects, this is, of course, a darkness party, and this character makes attacks and wants to stand in the darkness near our allies, so we're going to need some way to become immune to our allies' darkness since we don't naturally get that. There's two main ways that this character can do that, and it'll depend on what story event you are planning to do with your party. Shar's Spear of Evening makes you immune to blind, and so you can operate normally in darkness, and is the most powerful way to do this. It's also the best weapon for this character, so if you're taking the story path that gets you Shar's Spear of Evening, it's going to be the best in slot weapon for attacking with, casting darkness additionally, and seeing in darkness as well. If you don't have it, then you're going to want to use the Eversight Ring, which will give you blindness immunity. If you're using the Eversight Ring, then pass the Coruscation Ring back over to your Bard instead of taking it on this character. So either way, you're going to get blindness immunity, but it's going to be a little conditional on which story event you took. We're going to use the Luminous Armor for most of the game, but before we get the ability to apply a lot of radiant damage, there are times when you may want to use just a normal heavy armor like the Adamantine Splint, just a great defensive tool, so this character has access to that as well. In addition to these specific items, there's a couple other very important tools that this character needs. You have no natural way to get Misty Step, so you can use the Disintegrating Nightwalkers, or once you are putting on the Boots of Stormy Clamor, the Amulet of Misty Step, in order to get that on this character, and give yourself a Get Out of Jail Free card. And we also need to increase our initiative significantly, so there are two initiative items that this character has the highest priority for, these being the Sentinel Shield, giving us +3 to initiative, and the Hellrider Longbow, which occupies just our bow slot, so is totally passive, and also gives us +3 to our initiative, for a total of +9 with our 3 dexterity. That's enough for an honor mode character, so we're going to be very well off in terms of initiative just with these items. So in the early game, we're buffing our allies, as well as doing all the awesome damage and tanking and control that this character's already capable of, and then in the late game, we turn into an absolute control monster, locking enemies down just by being near them, debuffing them consistently with our Radiating Orb effects, and then our ally will take over the healing aspects of the character so that your party doesn't lose access to that extremely powerful ability. Also, I said Shar's Spear of Evening is the best weapon for this character. If you aren't using Shar's Spear, then pretty much any powerful one-handed weapon will do. You can use something like the Blood of Lathander or the Devotee's Mace, which does radiant damage, so will increase your debuffing even further. Either of those make great one-handed weapon options, but at that point, you can kind of experiment with what one-handed weapon you think is going to be most useful for the character. Char's Spear stands out as being particularly good, but this character's damage doesn't actually come from its weapons. It comes from its smite attack, from hexes, from spirit guardians, and so on. So, you can use a more utility-focused one-handed weapon like one of these maces that also gives you some nice buffs. This character also gets to stack yet another broken item effect, because our Warlock is using the Gloves of Battle Mage's power to stack arcane acuity. We're making a lot of weapon attacks, so we can still use the Helmet of Arcane Acuity. It didn't go away when patch 8 hit, even though the gloves have sort of overtaken its place at the top of the totem pole. In order to stack irresistible commands. Since we'll often be hasted thanks to another party member, we can make 2 weapon attacks, get 4 arcane acuity stacks, and then use our haste action to cast command. It'll be basically irresistible. Remember, our save DCs are really high on this character because we're maximizing our charisma. You can also just go with a more defensive helmet like the Helm of Baldur. That will give you even more safety for this party and make them significantly harder to kill as well. Immunity to stun, additional armor class and saving throws, and immunity to critical hits will take this already incredibly powerful defensive character and make it almost impossible for enemies to kill it. So either of these make great options depending on whether you really want to stack every broken effect in the game or want to have a little bit more safety with the immunities. Overall, the itemization for this character is stacking buffs for your allies and defensive stats on this character and debuffs for your enemies, so you just want as many of those. And then, of course, you need to grab Misty Step and some initiative bonuses in order to patch the weaknesses of this character. Luckily, our other party members don't need those items, so this character can grab them. I just had to briefly pause recording because my cat was demanding to come into my office and sit on my lap, which is unlucky for him because our next character is a Shadow Sorcerer, and I don't think he and Nimbus would get along very well. Shadow Sorcerer is incredible for this party for many reasons. Firstly, of course, this is a darkness party, and this is a darkness-focused character. But secondly, our first 2 party members provide our main damage dealer and our off damage dealer, our secondary damage dealer, and our main tank and our secondary tank, respectively. Between that tag team duo, they do almost everything that a party needs, but there's a couple things that a Shadow Sorcerer provides that they don't get access to. Firstly, we can empower those characters dramatically through buffing spells. Secondly, we get a great way to cast darkness so that those characters don't have to, so that the Hexblade doesn't have to spend valuable spell slots and actions doing so. And thirdly, the Shadow Sorcerer provides area of effect damage and upfront burst damage in even greater amounts, so we can end encounters even faster by blowing up lots of chaff enemies if we're facing encounters with lots of small enemies. So Sorcerer gives us buffs to our whole party, increased effectiveness. Sorcerers are just sort of extremely powerful in general, and also gives us a great way to clear lots of weak enemies, which can be a problem, especially in the early game, for the rest of the party. This Shadow Sorcerer is going to, at first level, take as your cantrips Firebolt and Ray of Frost, because of course we want multiple damage types, and these 2 for proccing omens from Nimbus, and these 2 are the best early game combat spells. It also gives you the utility to freeze water and light fires, which most parties should really strive to have access to, so very important to have these 2 cantrips in order to do that. In addition to that, we're going to grab Mage Hand, an excellent utility cantrip that can create those pools of water by throwing water bottles or throw potions at our allies, so a great option for every party to have. And then finally, we're going to pick up Minor Illusion so that we can group enemies before combat. We could have our last party member, our Bard, be the Minor Illusion caster, but it's pretty nice for the Shadow Sorcerer to be able to do it, because then you can group enemies or pull enemies off using this character before blowing them up with an area of effect spell without having to switch control between characters, so it makes it a little easier to manage in real time. For our spell selection, we're going to be taking Chromatic Orb and Magic Missile as our early game combat spells. Chromatic Orb gives us all of the possible damage types that we want in order to trigger omens from Nimbus, and also is just the best overall early game combat spell. And Magic Missile gives us a guaranteed source of damage. Very important for every party to have access to Magic Missile somewhere in it. There's some encounters that Magic Missile is invaluable for, so this party member manages to bring that at very little cost because, of course, it is a sorcerer. For our ability score selection, this is going to look pretty familiar, although very slightly different. We're going to be taking 16 in Charisma, 12 in Wisdom, 8 in Intelligence, but for this character, we're going to take 16 Constitution and 14 Dexterity. A lot of what this character is going to be doing is concentrating on either darkness or haste, so you don't want to lose concentration on those effects. And while this does cost us initiative and armor class, sorcerers have very low base hit points, and while they get constitution save proficiency, increasing our constitution means that we are much less likely to drop concentration on those important spells, so it's very useful for this character. You can still just take 16 dexterity, but for this character, because of our very low base hit points, I prefer 16 Constitution in order to keep yourself healthy. Again, this character can be your party face, depending on which is your main character, so choose your skills accordingly. Of course, you can pick up things like Insight and Persuasion as a sorcerer, so this makes a very solid party face as well, and is a natural choice. That'll depend on which character you prefer from a role-playing sense to have handling your conversations, one of the advantage of the all-charisma party. At Shadow Sorcerer level 2, we get to start using Meta Magic, and of course we're going to take Twin Spell, which will allow us to twin haste on our 2 melee characters, very, very useful, of course, and Distant Spell, so this character can play even further and from additional safety. For our spell selection at this level, we're going to go ahead and grab Shield, so that we can defend ourselves more easily. Of course, Shield is the best defensive reaction in the game, so having it is very important for every character that can have access to it. Level 3, we get second level spells, and we're going to go ahead and grab Cloud of Daggers. By the way, you can just ignore the spells that are highlighted in yellow. That's just because Gale has learned some spells from scrolls in this playthrough, because he's a wizard in this save file. And we're going to pick up Quicken Spell, of course, because every sorcerer wants to be able to cast multiple spells per turn. We also get Darkness and Eyes of the Darkness, allowing us to cast Darkness, both with a spell slot or with sorcery points. You're going to want to use sorcery points so that this character can also see through the darkness. At level 4, we're going to grab another cantrip. This character is going to want to pick up utility cantrips, so we're going to pick up Light here so that we have access to Light. While this party is going to play in darkness a lot, having Light is still very useful for every party, so this is going to be the character that's going to spend a cantrip selection on picking up Light. And then for our spell selection here, we're going to go back to level 1 and pick up Mage Armor. We've been fine without it up to this point, but this character is going to be unarmored for most of the game, and you may want to pick up Mage Armor for your Hexblade later on if they swapped using the Potent Robe, so we're going back to level 1 and grabbing it. Notice that we're not taking some of the normal spells that you might consider taking. Spells like Scorching Ray or Hold Person aren't necessary for this sorcerer to have because those are available on our other party members, and we don't really need the burst damage. Instead, this character is going to focus on AoE damage and team support, so we're taking more supporting spells than a normal sorcerer would take. At level 3, though, we're still going to pick up Alert because we want to make sure that our entire party is going before the enemies, so Alert is key for that. And then at level 5, we're going to get 3rd level spells, which will give us access to Counter Spell, so this character can now provide our 2nd copy of Counterspell. This gives us a tremendous amount of team utility. We can also now replace one of our lower level spells. We are much less likely to be concentrating on Cloud of Daggers at this point because we now have access to haste. So if we're spending our concentration on something that isn't darkness, it's almost always going to be twinning haste on our 2 main damage dealers, the 2 melee characters. At character level 6, we can now summon Nimbus to refresh our sorcery points in combat. We're very good at dealing lots of different elemental damage types in this party. We have cold and fire just from our cantrips. Our allies have thunder damage already, so you just need acid, which you can get from the caustic band, which any party member can wear up until they have more important rings. And poison damage, which is a little harder to do, but of course, there are plenty of ways to get that in order to apply those omens. You can also just give up on the poison damage omen if you prefer to do it that way, but mostly this gives your party yet another powerful tool in the form of Nimbus, who is a great summon. This party has a significant amount of summon utility as well, which will often cause enemies to attack the summons instead of your allies, since your allies are so highly defensive and will often be placed inside of darkness clouds. For our spell selection at this level, we're going to go ahead and grab Lightning Bolt. This is a non-concentration damage spell if an enemy is wet, either from Create Water from an ally or from throwing a bottle of water at them with the Mage Hand, then it'll blow up whole encounters, so an extremely useful spell to have. Character level 7, we get additional spells, and we're going to take Wall of Fire. I'm a strong believer that every party should have Wall of Fire somewhere in the available to the party, because there's so many encounters that it just wins outright. It is another concentration spell, but it's again an AoE damage spell, so it furthers the goals of this character. Level 8, we're going to go ahead and take Ice Storm as well as a non-concentration damage spell. Again, AoE damage is the most important thing for this character. And then for our feat, we're just going to take an ability improvement. Our charisma actually doesn't matter that much to this sorcerer, because we have very few effects with spell save DCs that matter. All of our save DCs are just on damage spells, and usually you want to use damage spells in such a way that enemies will still die even if they pass the saving throw and take half damage from them. So obviously we're still going to increase our charisma, but it's not as important, and we can get away with taking alert first even more easily than most characters can. At character level 9, we get 5th level spells, which allows us to further our AoE damage plan by selecting Cone of Cold. With double Cone of Cold available to the party, you can have an enemy or group of enemies get wet, either from Create Water or by throwing a bottle of water at them, and then double Cone of Cold them to blow up entire encounters instantly with this character, an extremely powerful strategy. As well as the Hexblade, who has the second copy of Cone of Cold. Character level 10, we get an additional cantrip. Now here you can pick up kind of whatever you want for fun. Acid Splash can sometimes help you trigger omens, or you can take Bursting Sinew to blow up corpses just because it's funny. Mostly doesn't matter what you select for your cantrip at this level. And then for your spell selection, you can go back for an earlier game control spell or utility spell. Something like Invisibility can be very useful to the party. You can get a second copy of Fog Cloud, that kind of scenario. Or you can pick up Fireball if you want additional AoE damage. There's a lot of different options that you have for your spells at this level. The one that I like most is picking up Sleet Storm. This is a control spell and it requires concentration, but it's such a powerful spell that it's just great to have access to this gigantic AoE ice surface, even in the late game. For our meta magic, we're going to go ahead and take Heightened Spell. This is very powerful because a lot of enemies might survive taking half damage from our damage spells. Heightened Spell will guarantee that they take full damage by giving them disadvantage, so you can use this to guarantee enemy deaths. It's not going to be one that you're using as often as a more control-focused character, but still pretty useful overall to the Shadow Sorcerer. Level 11, we get to take Shadow Walk, which gives us an amazing bonus action teleport, which we can use pretty much for free, and we get Distant Spell for free as well, so we can respec that to a different meta magic, like Careful Spell. Mostly doesn't matter what other meta magic you pick. Extended Spell can be useful for some spells as well. But the main thing here is that this is just infinite use Misty Step, so it gives this character incredible positioning opportunities and ability to get out of trouble. We also get 6 level spells, including Globe of Invulnerability, one of the most important utility spells in the game. Just instant wins some encounters. A lot of late game encounters are pure damage races, and Globe of Invulnerability wins those instantly. Finally, at character level 12, we have a couple different options. We can take a feat here in order to grab our ability improvement and level up our charisma to maximum, or we can take another sorcerer spell, one of the earlier utility spells, whatever you feel like your party is missing at this point. You will now have a good sense of what you feel like you don't have, or just chain lightning for additional damage. The other option at level 12 is simply to take a level of wizard. Now, if you do respec into taking a level of wizard, you're going to want to use a respec and take this at first level, and then you can learn a bunch of scrolls. This gives you a lot of utility scrolls available. The most important of these is Conjure Elemental, which you can learn, and then use your 6th level spell slot on a Myrmidon summon. You don't need the wizard level earlier, because although it gives you more spell access, it delays access to your higher level spells, so I wouldn't take the wizard level until level 12. But respecking to take wizard at level 1 when you hit level 12 gives this character tremendous amount of additional utility. You don't really need higher charisma, because remember, we are not using our... we don't have a lot of spells that care about the save DCs, and the ones that do are just damage, so you'll still deal good damage to enemies. So this character can get away with taking one fewer ASI in order to get a vastly expanded spell pool. So either taking a last level of Sorcerer is good, taking one level of Wizard and then respecking to place it at level 1 is, generally speaking, even better. For items for this character, one of the great things about the Shadow Sorcerer in this party is that it is almost completely item independent. It does pretty much everything that you need just on the base strength of the character alone. And because you don't need the save DC items, particularly on this character, they're free to go on other characters. So my advice for itemization for your Shadow Sorcerer is have fun with it. Use all the wild and wacky items that you've always looked for a home for, but never been able to fit into a build. Things like, I don't know, the Gibbous of the Worshipful Servant, or the Burnished Ring, which have cool effects, but typically are hard to fit into parties. There are some specific items that you're definitely going to want to use, though. This is going to be your Robe of the Weave character. This, of course, is the most powerful wizard and sorcerer armor in the game, so you're going to want to use it on this character in combination with mage armor for high armor class, and this will also be your Marka Heshkir character as well. Since we're using mage armor, you can use the Bracers of Defense to increase your armor class even further, or the Gloves of Dexterity. Marka Heshkir gives this party even more upfront burst damage, as well as letting you reset your 6th level spell slots. So you can, for example, use Conjure Elemental from a Conjure Elemental scroll that you've learned, and then also still have access to Globe of Invulnerability or upcasted lower level spells, and so on. Another great item for this character is the Amulet of Greater Health. Again, we prioritized taking Constitution, but if you have the Amulet of Greater Health, you can drop your Constitution down to 8, boost this character's Constitution up to 23, giving it significant increases to its hit points and ability to maintain concentration on spells. Also nice because you'll get this around the point when you respec to put Wizard at level 1, which costs you Constitution save proficiency, so you instead just boost your Constitution to massive levels and still no longer ever drop concentration, especially in combination with the +5 bonus that you're getting from your allies. Also, be sure to carry a large selection of utility scrolls on this character. The main weakness of the Shadow Sorcerer is that you get relatively limited scroll access, so making sure to carry piles of scrolls that you think might be useful. This is going to be the character that's typically going to cast them, especially scrolls of spells that don't require concentration, because you'll often be concentrating on haste or darkness, but having non-concentration utility spells can be extremely helpful to make sure that you always have relevant actions to do. And for our final character, the only thing that we're really missing from this party is healing and support. So we're going to tie the entire party together with a dedicated support character that will provide healing, buffs, control for enemies, guaranteed lockdown for fights that would otherwise be difficult, and a ton of utility and support effects for our party. This is also the perfect scenario to play a Glamour Bard in, because we have 2 melee allies who can make excellent use of the bonus hit points from Mantle of Inspiration, and will be able to charm enemies for us very reliably by moving next to them and then deliberately provoking attacks of opportunity in order to charm enemies and guarantee lockdown with Mantle of Majesty. We also have the bonus to saving throws from the Paladin and a great defensive setup with our other allies, so we will never drop concentration on Mantle of Majesty, allowing this character to, once per long rest, just outright win a fight without having to expend any other resources. The additional short rest that we get from Song of Rest is also very, very useful for our Hexblade as well. So the Glamour Bard, in combination with the Star Druid, who also gives us even less ability to fail concentration saves and so on, is going to allow this party to be even more solid and even more unkillable. Now, although this is going to be primarily a Bard build, we're going to be multiclassing, and we're going to start with a level of Druid. That way we can still tie our save DCs for items and scrolls to Charisma by taking Bard second, and Druid gives us a lot of awesome utility in the early game. For our cantrip selection for this character, we're going to go ahead and pick up Guidance and Resistance. We don't want to take combat cantrips on Druid, because those would use Wisdom, and we're going to be boosting our Charisma. And Guidance and Resistance are two must-have utility spells for every party in the game, so this will make the our skill checks and any saving throws that we have to make for story events and dialogue vastly easier, now that we have access to those from this character. For our ability score selection, we're going to go ahead and pick up we're going to clear all of these. We're going to take 16 in Charisma, and for this character, we'll also be taking 16 Dexterity rather than Constitution. While we do need to maintain saving throws, this character is going to have excellent armor class, so will very rarely get hit. So unlike the Sorcerer, I think we're better off taking higher Initiative and AC from higher Dexterity. We'll also be using one of the uncapped medium armors, most likely, so getting the full benefit of that Dexterity. And then, of course, all of our stats are going to be, or all of our effects are going to be tied to Charisma, so we want to max that as much as possible. If you want this to be your party face, that does mean you have to take a background that gives you Persuasion proficiency, because Druids don't naturally get access to it, and we're going to want to use our free Bard skill on taking Sleight of Hand, because this will also be our lock-picking character. You could also take a background that gives you Sleight of Hand, like Urchin, to get Sleight of Hand and Stealth. Either way works just fine, but making sure that you have both Persuasion and Sleight of Hand, so you need to get one of those from your background on this character. Other than that, we're going to go ahead and just take Perception and Insight, skills that will be useful in dialogue. We have our Druid spells as well, which are very much worth mentioning because that allows this party member to bring Long Strider and Enhanced Leap. Of course, you can have a Camp Caster cast Long Strider, but this gives you the two super important level 1 ritual spells, allowing your party to all move faster and have a lot more mobility in combat, so getting access to those is excellent. Character level 2, we're immediately going to multiclass and start taking levels of Bard. For our cantrip selection on Bard here, we're going to go ahead and take Vicious Mockery. This gives us a combat spell, and it's also very funny to use. This character can also pick up other utility spells. A second Mage Hand is pretty useful, because it's on a short rest cooldown. You can take Minor Illusion as well for another copy of that. This character can also take Light if you want your Shadow Sorcerer to take a different cantrip, but most of the time you're just going to take Friends if this is going to be your party face. For our spell selection here, we're going to take Dissonant Whispers, which is the most important combat spell for a bard to have access to, and this will allow us to lock down enemies in the early game. And we will also be taking Healing Word and Cure Wounds. Since this character is going to be our buff on heal item character, sometimes we're going to want to use Cure Wounds as an action in order to trigger those effects because we have a more important bonus action. And this character is going to be a Star Druid with access to Chalice Healing. Sometimes you want to trigger the free Chalice Healing using an action rather than a bonus action, so that you can then, for example, use drink a potion or something like that. So having access to both gives you flexibility for using your actions more effectively in combat. Your last spell here is kind of up to you. If you want something like Disguise Self, then this is the place to take it. Tasha's Hideous Laughter is also a great utility spell for locking down bosses, so that's what I'm going to recommend from a combat perspective. Of course, this is a bard build, so make sure you take the right instrument or you're going to ruin the entire party. And then for our ability scores here, you can take Sleight of Hand to make sure that this character can provide the lockpicking that your party needs as well. Level 3, we get our second level of Bard, giving us Song of Rest and an additional spell. Again, what spell you take here is sort of up to you. You can pick up, like for flavor spells, things like Disguise Self or Speak with Animals, if this character is your party face. Heroism is also useful in some encounters in the early game. Thunder Wave can be good utility for pushing enemies away from you. Any of those are great options. We'll be replacing these level 1 spells later on, so what you pick here is just to get you through the early game. And then at Bard level 3, we get to take College of Glamour, which gives us Mantle of Inspiration so that we can use our Inspiration dice to buff our allies, and if enemies manage to hit them, they'll get charmed. This has no saving throw, and if enemies manage to land an attack, very difficult to do against our party, who has Radiating Orbs, Darkness, and so on, then they will become charmed and have to choose a different target, which is going to be almost impossible because of how much lockdown we have available and how many defensive options we have. So this character gets to really disrupt the very, very few fail cases for your party members. If they happen to be running into any sort of trouble, Mantle of Inspiration bails them out of it. It also just increases the total hit point pool of your party dramatically. At this level, it's not that much, but as we continue to level, we're going to increase the total HP of our party enormously, which again, given how much we're multiplying our effective hit points with our awesome defenses, means that each of these temp HP is worth a lot more than the 5 that's listed on the number here, right? We're taking half damage from every spell because we'll always pass our saving throws against spells, and we're taking, on average, like 1/10 of a damage that attacks do, because enemies will be so stacked up with Radiating Orb and Darkness effects that only 1 in a very small number of attacks are going to hit, or 1 in a very large number of attacks are going to hit. For our expertise here, we're going to go ahead and take Sleight of Hand expertise and Persuasion expertise, so we can be both the best party face and the best lockpicking character. Again, if this isn't your party face, you can take Perception expertise or something like that in order to just provide even more utility. And for our second level spells, we're going to go ahead and grab another copy of Cloud of Daggers. This just gives us a great combat spell for the early game, so very, very helpful to have access to that. We can also replace our early game pick here. We're gonna get rid of Heroism and add in Hold Person. The automatic critical hits from Hold Person are incredibly powerful for our 2 melee characters, so very useful to have a second copy of Hold Person here. At character level 5, we're actually going to go back and take a second level of Druid so that we can pick up the incredible Circle of the Stars abilities. This gives us the Starry Form abilities as well as casts of Guiding Bolt. Now these will use our Wisdom to target, but that's still often fairly hittable, especially because we will be using a lot of gear that increases our hit chance and save DC with spells. So we will sometimes be able to use these Guiding Bolts anyways. We get Guidance as a cantrip known, so if you really want to optimize, you can respec the character to take a different cantrip at level 1, so you're not doubling up on Guidance. But mostly we get these Starry Forms, which allow us to do radiant damage or additional healing. The Chalice healing gives us bonus healing whenever we heal, so we get an additional free action heal whenever we use a healing spell, like our Healing Word or Cure Wounds, so this is going to let us pass out the buff on heal item effects much more efficiently in the later game, and in the early game, the Dragon Form gives us a way to apply Radiating Orb effects extremely easily, while also preventing us from losing concentration on our very powerful spells. For prepared spells at this level, we're going to add in Create or Destroy Water, although because of course Create Water will let us set up burst damage combos with Cone of Cold later on, and it's just extremely useful to have in a number of encounters throughout the game. Though another spell to be aware of is Fog Cloud. This doesn't have a saving throw and blinds enemies without a saving throw. You're usually going to be using Darkness instead of Fog Cloud, but it can still be pretty useful. Level 5, we're going back to Bard, and we're going to go ahead and continue to select more cantrips here. I'm going to recommend taking Blade Ward. If you get into an emergency with this character, you can spend your action on Blade Ward and wait for help from your allies, and that can be useful, especially because you can Blade Ward and then as a bonus action, Mantle of Inspiration to give yourself a little bit of additional hit points, or Healing Word plus a Chalice heal to heal back to full and use Blade Ward to resist enemy damage for a turn or two. That can be very useful in a severe emergency. For our spell selection at this level, we're going to grab utility spells. So something like invisibility is always very useful, especially outside of combat, so very useful to have for this character. You can also pick up enhanceability. You don't usually want to spend a level 2 spell slot on rerolling an ability check, but there's a couple important ability checks in the game which enhanceability can be useful for. And then for our feat, we are going to go ahead and grab alert. This does leave our save DCs relatively low at this point, of course, but going first is just that important, and this character will be getting all of our save DC gear, so pretty much every item that increases your save DC is going on this character, so we're going to take alert, and then we can delay improving our charisma. We'll end up with only 18 charisma at the end of the build, but you can then increase that further, or you can increase your save DCs further, which is what you actually care about with this character. At level 7, we get Bard level 5, which improves our Bardic Inspiration, so we can recast Mantle of Inspiration a bunch more, because it now comes back on a short rest. And also, at level 5, we get to Mantle of Inspiration 3 characters for 8 hit points, instead of 2 characters for 5 hit points, so the amount of effective HP that we're getting goes up significantly. We also get 3rd level spells, and this character now gets some incredible crowd control spells. We're going to go ahead and grab Hypnotic Pattern for this character. We're also going to replace one of our lower level spells. You are no longer very likely to be concentrating on Cloud of Daggers on this character, although it can still be very useful. But instead, I'm going to suggest having Glyph of Warding, so you can spend a 3rd level spell slot. Remember, we have 3rd and 4th level spell slots on this character, because we have 2 caster levels from Druid as well. So Glyph of Warding can give you a lot of damage types and is a non-concentration damage option for when this character needs that, because we're often going to be concentrating on a control spell, or of course on Mantle of Majesty. This level, we're getting Mantle of Majesty, which again, we can make a no-save control effect. This is incredibly against enemies who are charmed. There's no saving throw for the charm if they hit your ally, and then there's no saving throw against Mantle of Majesty, so we get to cast Command as a bonus action once per, for 10 turns, once per long rest, which just outright wins some of the most difficult boss fights in the game. There's a couple bosses, like Merkel, that this party can otherwise struggle with. Mantle of Majesty trivializes those encounters and patches the only weakness remaining in the party, alongside all of the support and utility that this character is providing. For our spell selection at this level, again, you can go back and grab a utility spell like Enhanceability. You can also grab Plant Growth. Plant Growth in combination, you can also grab Plant Growth. Plant Growth in combination with Hunger of Hadar, which of course our Warlock has, is absolutely devastating. Enemies can't get out of the Hunger of Hadar because they can't target a jump to leave the Plant Growth, and they move at 1/4 speed, so it just instant wins a lot of encounters. Character level 7, we're getting 4th level Bard spells, and here we're going to go ahead and grab Freedom of Movement. This is just a pure panic button. If an ally gets stunned in a really bad situation, you can break them out of it with Freedom of Movement. And again, this character is about insurance. You're here to buff your allies' hit points, prevent enemies from chaining lots of attacks against them, because they'll get charmed halfway through and be unable to continue attacking, and provide all the healing and everything effects that your party otherwise is lacking. So having a spell that removes an ally from stun gives you, again, even more insurance with your party. Level 10, we get our 2nd feat, so we're going to go ahead and boost our charisma up to 18 here. For our spell selection at this level, you have a lot of different options, but we can just grab Enhanceability to make sure that we can pass the important late game skill checks that we need to be able to pass for story events like the Mirror. And then at level 9, we get 5th level spells. Here, we're going to go ahead and grab Hold Monster. This is, again, a very powerful control spell, and this character will have really high save DCs. We're not stacking infinite DCs with arcane acuity, but our save DCs will still be basically irresistible. And then finally, at character level 12, we get to hit Bard level 10, maximizing our Mantle of Inspiration, so it now targets all 4 of our party members for 11 hit points. You can also use this on Nimbus or other summons, which increases their hit point total dramatically, and Nimbus is especially good because if Nimbus survives a hit, he'll also split into Mini Nimbus, so this character buffs up Nimbus tremendously as well. We get expertise in 2 more skills, so you can go ahead and pick up expertise and additional dialogue skills, or whatever you happen to be using most frequently. We can take, as our cantrip, True Strike, of course, to annoy people in the YouTube comments, even more than they were already driven ballistic at the mere mention of a Glamour Bard. And then for our spell selection, at this point you should have a really good idea of what you feel like your party is missing, and you can go back and grab that. You can take Knock if you're having trouble opening locks, or any other of these utility spells, or just a good control spell in the form of something like Confusion. Polymorph can actually be useful in some encounters as well. Greater Invisibility lets you cheese some encounters, so there's a lot of really solid options. Of course, what we're really here for, though, is the magical secrets that we get access to at Bard level 10, and the first of these is always going to be Conjure Elemental, allowing you to summon Myrmidons. You can do it with the Wizard as well, but if you aren't a Wizard with your Shadow Sorcerer, if you've decided to take 12 levels of Shadow Magic, you still get the Myrmidon summon, because remember, we have 6-level spell slots, just not 6-level spells. So we can use Conjure Elemental with our 6-level spell in order to summon a Myrmidon. That buffs up our party for the entire day massively. We already have 2 copies of Counterspell. Normally on a Bard, you would always take Counterspell as your second one of the magical secrets here, but for this character instead, we're going to take Mass Healing Word. That's because in the late game, this is going to transition to applying the buff on heal items and spending most of the day in Chalice form. So Mass Healing Word will give all of your allies those buffs, as well as triggering Chalice for additional healing. Unfortunately, Warden of Vitality doesn't work with Chalice healing. It doesn't re-trigger Chalice. Otherwise, that would be a really cool combo. But the best way to do this is going to be to use Mass Healing Word in order to buff all of your allies. And for items for this character, you're going to execute the same swap that you did with the Paladin, but of course in reverse, where this character is going to be using the Radiating Orb item set as soon as you get access to Star Druid form, because the Dragon Breath applies these Radiating Orb effects extremely efficiently. So Callous Glow, Coruscation, Boots of Stormy Clamor, Gloves of Belligerent Skies will let you stack up Radiating Orb effects very easily. And then in the late game, you're going to swap to the Hellrider's Pride or the Reviving Hand, the late game version of the Hellrider's Pride, and the Whispering Promise in order to stack those buff on heal effects on your party members, especially using Mass Healing Word. In addition to that, you are looking for 2 things on this character. Defense, because you don't want this character to get hit. Very important not to drop concentration on your control spells. And you're looking for increases to your save DCs. So items like the Hood of the Weave, Ketheric's Shield is going to be the shield that you're going to use, which, of course, this character does have shield proficiency from Druid. The Hood of the Weave gives you +2 to your save DCs. Melf's First Staff is a good staff option to increase your save DCs as well. So this character can benefit from those items tremendously. And then defensive options, things like the Ring of Protection, Cloak of Displacement, that kind of item will allow this character to avoid getting hit. The Ring of Feywild Sparks also is worth mentioning. This has a secret property of increasing your spell save DC. It's not listed in the tooltip, but it increases your spell save DCs by +1. Important to know that, and this character will get that. And the Elixir of Battle Mage's Power, again, is the best elixir for this character, just boosting your save DCs as much as possible. The Boots of Striding are also excellent for this character once you've swapped off the Boots of Stormy Clamor, because then you will be unable to be knocked prone. Again, you have medium armor proficiency on this character, so you're totally fine to equip the Boots of Striding, and a medium armor like the Armor of Agility will increase your armor class tremendously. With this item setup, this character has 24 AC and always gives disadvantage to enemies even when not standing in darkness, so is going to be almost impossible for most enemies to hit, and they will very rarely get targeted. Finally, of course, this is a darkness party, so it can be very helpful to have a blind immunity effect. If you are using the Shar's Spear on your Paladin, then this character gets the Eversight Ring. If not, this character probably wants the Helldusk Helmet. It will reduce your save DCs, but the Helldusk Helmet gives you even higher spell saves, critical hit immunity, which is also not nothing for this character as well, and immunity to blindness, so you can operate safely in darkness. This character is also a pretty good candidate for the Helldusk Armor if you want a party member to use that. The Armor of Agility is, I think, a little bit better honestly, in the late game, but the Helldusk armor is legendary and very cool, and gives you some advantages, slightly higher armor class, although lower saving throws, because the Armor of Agility gives you +2 bonuses to your saves. So to sum it all up, this party has truly ridiculous amounts of lockdown, with almost every party member having irresistible or nigh irresistible lockdown effects that prevent enemies from doing anything. Great support from the Glamour Bard, which provides excellent insurance, and incredible damage from the 2 melee characters, especially when twin hasted by the Shadow Sorcerer. You also have darkness abuse, you use radiating orbs and reverberation, use the buff on heal items, so we get to use almost all of the most powerful and synergistic item sets in the game. So not only are all of these builds really strong in isolation, they're incredibly strong together because enemies are either dead or locked down very, very easily by these builds working in tandem. I've used this party extensively it was the party that I built for my first patch 8 honor mode playthrough, and had an absolute blast with it, and found it extraordinarily powerful, so this is playtested and everything, and I hope that it helps you with your patch 8 runs. I think that this is a great way, especially if you're looking for something a little bit new with the new subclasses, but also want to get an honor mode win. This is an excellent way to do it. As always, my friends, I hope that you've enjoyed the video, and of course, if you have, feel free to leave a comment and hit like. Helps me out with the algorithm, so I really appreciate you taking the time to do that. And you can subscribe to my channel for more Baldur's Gate 3 build guides and other strategy game analysis. Cheers, folks. I'll catch you next time.